Welcome back to another episode of the House Husband Diaries. As always, I am your host, Carter C. And today we are talking about career politicians, Democrats, Republicans, Democrats. It's all the same. Now, to us, they want to seem very different, and they come across in what they say as being very different on the campaign trail. But what I want to discuss, and I do want to hear your thoughts on this, but you got to hear me out first. I don't see, other than a few things, maybe a few votes here and there, a few pieces of legislation here or there, I don't really see a tremendous difference in the status quo and the big issues of America in terms of making America a better place for most, if not all. I mean, obviously, you can't make a better place for everybody because everybody has free will, so they're going to choose their own path to some degree. But what I don't see is what truly revelatory actions have we seen over the last 40 years come out of Washington, D.C. Now, if you are of a more left-leaning bent, you could probably say Obamacare was going to provide health care for everybody and it was going to be great, but let's just be honest, everybody's health care prices have been rising, and I really don't think that's a great thing because, well, I would like my health care costs to go down, and they've only gone up, so providing free health care for everyone, including illegal immigrants, is just not the answer. That's not great for the country. It may be great for your biased political party, but it's not great for everybody, right? There's an underlying issue in healthcare that is run by a lot of the companies and their bottom line, more so than providing, that needs to be addressed. That issue needs to be addressed before we start trying to give people free health care and have the government pay for it, because then our tax dollars are still going to pay the exorbitant health care costs, right? So don't put a Band-Aid on a problem and then call it fixed. Like it's just silly. It's ignorant and it's silly. That's not a revelatory action. So what I'm talking about is, what have we done as a country to make our education system better, to make our quality of life better, our feeding, less hungry people, less homeless people, less, more freedom of speech. We have declined. The U.S. has declined in almost all worldwide rankings for average lifespan, education, freedom, quality of life, all things I mentioned. We have started a backward slide in world rankings for almost all of these areas, because we are so focused on nitpicking and tearing people apart. Our politicians are, and then thus the news, and then other people, that we've forgotten to take care of each other. Our businesses are so focused on the bottom line. Our politicians are so focused on their jobs and on, whatever, becoming, staying in as a politician, staying in Washington as a career politician. They're not focused on what would be best for the country. And I think that's a big difference between the founding fathers of America and what decisions would be best for the country as a whole. And I know they made some bad decisions in certain areas, and there were things that I'm sure they would regret or what have you. But as we move forward for the next 40 years, right? I'm almost 40. I've said that in a number of videos. As I get to this point in my life and I look ahead to the next 40 years and I see the changes that have happened in my lifetime up till now, and I go, man, if I double my lifespan, what is the next 40 years going to bring? And I don't like the direction that things are heading, which is why I'm doing these videos and why we've moved into politics. Because one, I want to start the conversation. I think it's crazy that we shut people off if we disagree with them. I don't think that's right. I don't want to shut people off. Now, if you're an idiot and you're just trying to be an idiot, then yeah, like you should be shut off because you're not helping the conversation. But if you honestly believe something and you have reasons backing up why you believe it, then I'd love to hear them. And that's what I'm trying to do, is share what I think is the best way for the country to move forward, the ideas, the way I see things, and then just start the conversation and get feedback. And like I said, as I continue this channel and move along in the months ahead, my hope is to bring on guests, people that agree with me, people that disagree with me, and that way we can have a conversation and we really open it up to more people, more ideas, and then really start to kind of say, okay, let's put something in place to where, hey, there's an alternative here. So when I look at the way that DC handles issues, and when I say DC, I mean career politicians, the political world, over the last 40 years, it seems to me that the majority of information that comes out of DC is negative. And it's always negative against the political opponents. So they did a terrible job. They're bad at this. This is why you have a problem, because those people suck. And, we're great. If you just agree with us, the world would be better. And instead of saying, hey, there's this middle of the road where we can agree on certain things. And now I get that we're just going to have to agree to disagree at times, right? But what I find really interesting is that we seem to be doing all of these we have our fingers in all of this international stuff. And yet at home, we're becoming more divided. We have increasing hunger issues. Our education, is lacking. We need better education. And then the infrastructure of America, the roadways and the bridges, really needs to be looked at. Our Social Security needs to be looked at. Our healthcare system needs to be looked at. I mean, there are a lot of internal issues that we have in America that our politicians should be focusing on. And we as a country have to hold our politicians to a higher standard, right? So it comes back to us. If we don't like the way people are acting, whether we agree with them or not, and this is going to be something that people are going to say, oh, wow, are you going to vote for Trump? You seem to be right-leaning and all this, his actions are, what have you. I've already told you how I vote. I already told you I think the economy is the biggest issue right now. And right now, the only thing I'm hearing on the economy that anybody wants to put America first is Donald Trump. To me, the left-leaning candidates are all about issues that don't apply to me. Right. I don't think putting forth liberal agendas, climate change, legalizing abortion, same-sex marriage, all of those things don't apply to me. So I don't want my politicians to be focused on all of these things that don't apply. I think the economy applies to all of us, every single American. So we need to be focused on bringing jobs back. We need to be focused on bringing good jobs back, creating a marketplace and a trade, or a number of trade agreements all around the world where American-made products are highly valued and sent around the world. And that's hard when the dollar's strong and other countries can't afford American products. But that's what our politicians should be focused on as far as international trade goes. But then at home, we've got to figure out the Social Security, the healthcare, access to healthcare, and hunger issues. I mean, we have the most. So I just looked back up because I'd written an article a long time ago. Feeding America, I think, is the organization for all the food banks in the U.S. And they wrote that there are more than 37 million people that are hungry or food insecure. 37 million people in America, food insecure. That's more than 10% of the population. Is that not crazy to you? That's like 11 or 12% of the population of the United States of America. from the Appalachian Mountains, east, from the Appalachian Mountains west all the way to the Rocky Mountains, and then from the Rocky Mountains all the way to the coast, you've got with the exception of a few deserts down there in the Southwest. I mean, you've got more arable land in the United States than I think any country has. We produce so much food, it's outrageous. How in the world can we have hungry people in this country? I mean, that's crazy to me. In this day and age, in 2020, with the technology we have, nobody should be hungry, right? If you hold a job, all right, let me back up. The only people that should be hungry are people that struggle so mightily with things that they can't hold down a job. Nobody in their family can, whatever. There's just no reason that a person that works 40 hours a week or that has a job shouldn't be employed for 40 hours a week and be able to afford food for their family. Now, take that within reason, right? If you're a greeter at Walmart, I don't think you should be making enough money to provide housing and food for 9 children. Like that's a little much to ask, because that's a lot of mouths to feed. Okay, so within reason, if you have a job, you should make enough money to feed a family of a couple people. 4, that's a few. I get it, right? 3, 4 people. If you have 2 adults working, then 5, 6, whatever. You should have enough. Now, you're not going to have a mansion. You're not going to have a lot of things. You're not going to have a beach house or a lake house and a boat and all these other things, but you should be able to at least not be food insecure. And I know that people are going to take their money and they're going to do with it what they will, and they may choose to buy a car or a house or clothes, and then depend on other people for their food because you've got food stamps and other safety nets that some people are just going to take advantage of. But I don't believe that most people are trying to take advantage of the government and of other people. I think that there's a small percentage of the world and of Americans and of every group of people that does try to take advantage of people. But I don't think that's the majority of people. I think the majority of Americans do want to work. They want to work. They want to earn a living. I think it's really hard to not have a job to go to not be able to make money and provide for a family and do something that you enjoy. And we don't always enjoy everything. It's a long aside to get back to how we hold career politicians accountable. We don't have term limits. I think it's something we should seriously look at. But what incentive does a career politician have to vote in or to vote for term limits? They're in effect ending their money train. It's not going to happen, right? The only way to really institute term limits is to vote people out. You have to get out and you have to vote. You say that person's been there long enough. We need a new voice in Washington. But that takes a lot of effort on our part to research, to know, to keep up with. And if we're struggling, working 2 jobs, working 3 jobs, working night shift, taking care of kids or family members that can't take care of themselves, if we're trying to make ends meet and all of these other things, well, there's not a whole lot of time to really care about voting in or voting out somebody that's making $200,000 a year from the government, much less all of the free things that they're getting at being a congressman or woman or being a senator. And so, it's hard to take to really put the onus on people that are struggling day in and day out to spend the time to read up, to educate themselves, and to keep track of how long people have been in office, right? And then not only keep track of it, but then ring a bell and say, hey, maybe we should change it. And then the other thing is who are you gonna vote in their place? As I said in a previous video, are you gonna vote someone in that is going to be worse than the person you already have. Your life is like this on a normal day in and day out basis. And then, what's to say that your life's not going to be down here if you vote a number of other people down? I think for the most part, life stays like this for most of us. And it doesn't matter if there's a Republican in power. It doesn't matter if there's a Democrat in power. It doesn't matter who's running the House, who's running the Senate. Life's just sort of like that for the most part. So to really affect change in American policy is really daunting. And I think most people just sort of give up and they go, well, I tend to agree more with Democrats than I do with Republicans, or I tend to agree more with Republicans than I do Democrats. So I'm just going to vote for one or the other. And I'm going to be a lifelong Democrat, or I'm going to be a lifelong Republican. And that's just sort of how most people go about their political lives. And then there's a growing group of Americans that just say, I don't really care. They're going to do what they're going to do regardless. My vote doesn't count. And then they become apolitical and they just ignore everything. And I don't think that's a good situation either, right? Because when you're disinterested, you don't really have a say. Even if you don't think your vote counts on the grand scheme of things, or on the grand scale of things, at least you had a say. And you exercise that right, because a lot of people don't have that right. So what do we do, right? We've got a growing national debt. We've got the budding hunger crisis. We have globalization continuing to suck non-automatable jobs overseas to basically increase the bottom line of greedy companies. And this all isn't new stuff, right? Like we've always had issues in the history of humanity with people trying to find goods cheaper and people taking their business from one town to the next and their trade. And there's always this cycle of disparity of rich people, of poor people, some with the middle class, and how that changes in the seats of power. But I look at America in history, and we're coming up on 250 years, and really most democratically run countries don't last more than 200 years. So we're already past the historical norm, and you can see that in that we're not focused so much on how do we make America better, or as Trump would say, make America great again. We're not focused on making America better. We're focused. A lot of our politicians are focused on dividing people based off of race or ethnicity or gender or sexual orientation, and there's this whole vocabulary now, this whole rhetoric of dividing people, and then yet saying, but we don't judge. But it's like, if you don't judge, then don't talk about the color of somebody's skin. Don't talk about the sexual orientation of somebody. Don't talk about, like, if you're not judging, why make it an issue, and why do we have to hear about it all the daggone time? Because you're judging and you're making statements based off of that. It's terrible. And so instead of looking at people as, hey, that's a friend, or that's a fellow countryman, or that's, a neighbor, we're looking at people as, oh, you're those people that we don't like because we've been told, on all the stuff that we read and listen to, that you don't like us. And so it's really interesting when you have friends that you grow up with before all of this rhetoric of divisiveness has kind of seeped in. You go, hey, we're friends even though we're really different. We don't look like each other. We don't have the same sexual preferences. We're like, nothing about us is says we should be friends. We have different political beliefs. We have different all sorts of things, but yet we're still friends. And why is that? And I think that's more of where we've got to get back to as a populace, is to say, hey, and that's part of why I do these videos and I go on these diatribes and stuff, is that I think there's a decency of humanity of Americans that we need to get back to. And so if you watch this video and we disagree or we agree or what have you, then great, comment, we'll form a relationship. Maybe I'll have you on the show and we can just start the conversation, because this is going to take years and years and years and years to work, and it's going to be very small. But I think we have to start that discussion somewhere of how do we work within a system where it doesn't really matter necessarily who's president when you have a Congress that will spend all of their time trying to oust the president rather than work with the president. And I'm not just downing the Democrats, fighting Trump with all this impeachment stuff. The Republicans weren't willing to work very much or very well with President Obama either. So it has become a lot more partisan. There's a lot less shaking hands across the aisle and saying, this really would be better for the majority of Americans. I think the last thing I'll say on this is what we're running into as a country is we are such a large country with so many people now, 330 million people or so. We are so different, so many different regions, so many different people groups, so many different backgrounds, that it's hard to find the foundational core, how do I want to say this, thread that connects us or as Americans, and how do we come together around that one thing or those two or three things that unite us as Americans, as countrymen and women, to say, hey, this is for the benefit of the majority of us rather than a few of us as far as the pocketbook is concerned or health is concerned or what have you. And so really, I'm asking you guys, what do you think would be how can we come together to further this discussion? Do you think that's even possible? Do you think that's a positive direction? Maybe you don't even think we should discuss it. Maybe you think discussing it's not gonna help. But what I would like to do is be able to have these discussions and then say, hey, would this help improve the present and moving towards improving the future? And so I think really, when we have these discussions, because some people have been commenting, oh, you're this way or that, and really, I'm less. The point of this video is not to say I'm for a Republican or I'm for a Democrat or this is where I am, so much as it is to say I don't really think there's a whole lot of difference between the two in Washington. They all go to the same parties. They all do whatever together. They hobnob. They're in the same circle, right? They're in the same fraternity, if you will. But their speeches are very, very different to try to keep people apart and ill with each other and mad at other people and blaming other people, rather than coming together and having an honest conversation and say, oh, okay, well, I see that that's an issue. I agree with you. However, I don't agree that that's the number one issue for facing America today. And if somebody disagrees and says something like, I disagree with you, it doesn't mean that I disagree with you as a human being. I don't like you. I don't respect you. I don't think you're worthy. It just means I look at the world differently. And then if somebody looks at the world differently, instead of getting offended, it'd be better to say, okay, well, why do you believe what you believe? And then hash it out. But that takes time, and not everybody has the time or the willpower or the brain power to put into these types of conversations. So that's why I'm doing this. That's why I've moved into some political videos, because I really want to put some effort into what do you guys think? What are your takes on the current state of politics? I don't really care if you like or hate Trump. I really don't. Like, that's not the point of this, because whether Trump wins in November in the 2020 election or not, we have a limited amount of time as Donald Trump, with Donald Trump being president. What we don't have a limited amount of time is are the people that are in Congress. And I mean, the only thing that's going to limit Pelosi and Schumer and McConnell and those guys and girls is going to be their age. And I don't think that should be it. They're too old. They're already 80 some or in their 80s or nearing it. And why are they still in power? Right? That's just weird. So, let me know if you think there's a big difference between Democrats and Republicans. If so, why? Or let me know if you agree with me and you don't think there's a big difference between the career politicians and the Democrats and the Republicans. And then next episode, I'm going to talk about why we don't have a strong third party, because I think that would be really interesting to see what these politicians would do if there was actually a viable third party, a candidate, and a party that would consistently put forth competition, basically. Let's put it that way. So thanks so much for watching this episode of the House Husband Diaries. As always, I hope you are having a great day, and I will look forward to talking with you tomorrow.